Hello, my friends. How are you? I hope you are doing outstanding. This is Heather. And this week on the Back to Me podcast, I am talking to Sarah Rose Bright. And I have to tell you, I will be totally honest and transparent. This one, I was a little, I didn't know if I wanted to. I mean, Sarah Rose is great, but I didn't know if I wanted to do a podcast because why? We're talking, Sarah Rose is an intimacy and sex coach. But let me tell you, it was a great conversation and I hope you enjoy it. And you can just let me know what you think. Take care, have a listen, share it if you feel like it, and I will talk to you soon. Hi, my friends. Welcome. This is the Back to Me podcast, and this is Heather, and I am super excited that you're here. You are going to hear some tips and some tricks and some ideas to help you live your happiest and healthiest self. I call it Back to Me because when you are taking care of yourself, back to me, then you can take better care of others, and we can all make the world a better place. This is Wellness Your Way, and I am super happy that you're here. Hello, my friend. Welcome. I hope you're having an outstanding day. This is Heather. This is the Back to Me podcast. This is the Amazing Human edition where we get to talk to someone totally awesome and outstanding. And I'll tell you today, I'm pretty excited. I'm talking to Sarah Rose Bright, who is an intimacy and sex coach. And yes, my friends, we're doing it. We're going to talk about it. And we're going to talk about how self-care can affect those things for you. Sarah Rose, thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for the invitation. It's a pleasure.
Yes, and it's so funny. It's so funny that there are things in the world that are so natural and normal, and we get a little heebie-jeebie sometimes about it. And I know that when we first spoke, when we were talking about you coming on the podcast, I had that but I'm being brave. Let's be brave. Let's be brave. So, but I always am super curious in the beginning of how did you get into this field of being an intimacy and sex coach? How did that come about even?
Well, it certainly wasn't on offer in the career service in the school that I went to as an
No?
option. And people sort of sometimes have an assumption that because I do this work, it must be because I've always been great at sex and intimacy. And actually, for me, it's been the opposite. I do this work because I've had so many challenges in this area of my life. And I was raised very much to be the good girl. So that was a sort of starting platform for my sexual challenges. And then I had very abusive relationship in my teenage years, which really left my self-esteem and my body image in tatters. And I didn't realize at the time that it was really not my fault. I thought there was something wrong with me, that I had this happen to me. And I numbed out on addictions and all sorts of different things until in my late 20s, I just got this real wake up call of this is the place that I need to look at. And it was the biggest thing that I've ever looked at. Huge fear, ginormous fear to face this part of my life. But at the time, I was so deeply unhappy in unhealthy relationships, just didn't like sex, was terrified of sex, didn't know what I wanted, didn't know how to ask for it, super critical of myself. And all of these things stacked up to just before my 30th birthday. It was like, I have got to look at this. And so since then, I went on a huge journey. It's now 20 years ago since that time. And it's been one of the most profound things I've ever done. And now it's my joy and honor to support women and couples in the same way, because when I had these problems 20 years ago, there was so little help available. There's much more around today. But even though there's much more around, still for so many people, this is a source of struggle and challenge and discomfort, shame, all sorts of different things.
Well, and it's true. I mean, you joking it wasn't offered in your school. It's not like you could open the classified ads and look under the job listings. Yeah, that's what I'm going to do right there. But it is true. I mean, upbringings, and there's so many things wrapped around whether you're supposed to talk about these things. And this is like, I read book by Jen Sincero. It was funny enough, it was actually about money, but she brought up this exact this exact thing, and it was, in the introduction, it was, there's these taboos in your life. You're not allowed to talk about sex or money, but you're supposed to be good at both of them just automatically. It's like, why is that? Why do we just assume that, oh yeah, you're just supposed to be good at it? Let's not talk about it.
Yeah.
And I mean, and it's so tied up into so many things like body image and advertising and, sex sells, and this could go in so many directions. But where, how do people usually come to where they approach you? Like, how do they Google? Like, can't even imagine how people would come to the decision that they needed to find that kind of
Yeah.
assistance.
Well, it's amazing because a lot of people don't know that this kind of assistance is even available. Really just don't know. And so for some people, well, often when people come to me, there's been something that's happened in their life that has made them feel, I have to look at this. So, for example, it might be a relationship breakdown where sex or intimacy challenges were a part of it. It might be the potential of a new relationship and knowing that this has been a problem before, not wanting to repeat those patterns, or getting to, for example, a big birthday and realizing you're tired of missing out on opportunities because this area isn't, you're not comfortable with this area of your life. Or it can be things like menopause and different changes in life, that sort of instigate some curiosity as to what's possible. Or, women often say to me, I wondered if this is it for me in this area of my life. And I just had to find out, is there some possibility that things could change? And, if you're a woman listening in that place, 100% for every woman listening who thinks that, there is possibility. And so
Right.
people either start following people like me on social media or Googling. And so, but the thing is, for many women, and this is true of a lot of things in terms of pelvic problems like incontinence and prolapses and different things like this, it sometimes takes years for people to reach out because the fear can be so big. And so many times women say to me, oh my God, I can't believe this is so much easier than I had in my mind. The story I created was this was going to be awful. And actually, this is fun and I'm enjoying it. So it's a big thing to reach out. I really want to honor anybody who does that.
And it is true. I mean, it you don't want to if you don't want to discuss it with a girlfriend, how are you going to discuss it with a stranger, right? It's like, and I mean, you made comments about, and I know, you don't, because I was talking to a pelvic coach one day. You don't even have to have had children to have prolapse
Yeah.
happen, and I don't know that. I mean, doctors are amazing. My doctor friends, I love you all, but that's maybe not always, they don't always necessarily know what to do with those things. It's, they have so many tools in their toolbox. And there are lots of things their body, oh my God, let's even not, like, menopause is crazy land. Menopause is, I feel like it's puberty in reverse, but worse. And, and you don't know, you're like, because sometimes your doctor will just say, my doctor actually said, well, that's the way it is. I was like, well, no, it's not. And, but I am one of those people who will go out and explore and ask lots of questions. So it is like, dip your toe in and find out what's possible. So do you have tools that people use when they come to you? I mean, I think, I don't know, my audience is kind of all over the place, but
So, so first of all, I think that's really important what you shared is often we're told this is it. The standards for women's health and well-being can be pretty low in some quarters. And I'm like you, I'm the curious one, the investigator, the researching, seeing what's possible. And even if people listening just hear that message today, that wherever you are, change is possible. And that's where getting the right support can make all the difference because, doing it on your own can be, there's so much information out there, it's overwhelming. And trying to discern what is actually quality information and what's helpful information can be is not an easy job. And that's where
no.
people like me come in to just sort of clear the pathway to share that. So in terms of practices and tips, I mean, I have got so much, 20 years worth here. But
Right.
what I would share is that often when women come to me, and say, for example, I have a lot of women come to me where they're not experiencing, not feeling much desire for sex. They are maybe not feeling great about their bodies, commonly maybe not even sure what they enjoy in their bodies, or if they do, they don't know how to ask for it. So, all of these sort of things. And where I start is looking at the everyday, because many of the women that I work with, it's all about a big part of it is they don't make the link that if they're exhausted and they're stressed, that has a massive impact on their ability to feel and enjoy pleasure. And a
Right.
lot of women I work with haven't got a relationship with pleasure. Pleasure is something that they do when they're on holiday, or, it might be an odd spa day with the girls or whatever it is. But in the day to day, often they don't feel they have time for pleasure. There's too much to do. And, sometimes there really is too much to do. You could be someone out there who's juggling kids, caring responsibilities, all sorts. However, there's so much we can do to change our relationship with pleasure. And for me, I was raised with that real Protestant work ethic where pleasure's postponed. Pleasure's something you do on a Sunday when all the jobs are done, when you go on holiday, and then you postpone your pleasure to retirement. And for
Right.
me, I had to really unlearn my relationship with pleasure. So this might start with just something simple of like, what do you enjoy doing? What sparks joy? What lights you up? And it might be, oh, I never read, which I love to, or I never get out for a walk, or whatever it is. And just inviting micro moments of pleasure into the day, whether that's just taking a breath of fresh air out of the office, or it might be just giving yourself some lovely self touch. There can be so many things that can be sitting down instead of drinking your coffee while you're texting and scribbling away. It might be just putting everything for a side and just having 5 minutes to drink your coffee and look out the window. And so the first thing is for a lot of women I work with is just looking at our relationship with pleasure, because if we can't enjoy pleasure in the day to day, it's going to really affect our ability to then switch off and enjoy it in a more intimate setting.
Right. It's kind of like, well, I'll have fun at 6 o'clock on Tuesday night or something. It's like, I don't think you can work that way. I can't work that way. And it's interesting you said about taking that time for pleasure, because I was visiting a friend in her new home, and she has a corner specifically set up with, she calls it her Mrs. Doubtfire chair. This chair, and she sits there next to this big window with the sunshine, drinking her coffee in the morning, and that's how she wants to set the mood for her day. It's like, that's brilliant. And it's true, if you are running, like I've been teaching this webinar called Ditch Your To-Do List, trying to stop the running, because if you're running, and you get to the end of the day, you're like, then it's just part of your to-do list. Okay, now we're going to have intimacy. Check. No, it doesn't really work. And do you find it's just like those little, I guess, I have been talking about it lately, small changes for big changes. It's like just those little drops, and they can start to see the shift.
100%. And, neuroscience shows that a way to integrate a new habit is much more about little and often than saying, oh, you have to do an hour self pleasure practice on a Friday night or something. Just these
Right.
micro moments. And also, I invite you to see them as treats, not chores. And it's
Right.
like we see it as a chore, another thing to do on the to-do list, and then it just often doesn't even happen because it's always usually at the bottom as well, the pleasure piece. And so actually, I'm just going to have 5 minutes to just sit and take a breath and just whatever it is. And what I find is the more clients do that, sometimes then the easier they get through the next hour's work because they just got a smile on their face, or they just feel more relaxed. And those pleasure hormones, when we do the good things, we activate a cocktail of pleasure chemistry in the body, which when so many of us are running around with stress and adrenaline and cortisol and all of these sort of things running around our systems, it's just good for our health and well-being overall. And I love that story you shared of your friend, because it's that setting up your day putting your pleasure at the sort of top of the day, if you can do that.
Right.
And you know, that's not easy for some people, and we all have different lifestyles and commitments, but you know, that's just a beautiful example of making your pleasure a priority. But for many women I work with, they've never learned to put themselves first. And you know, that's such a huge thing. It can seem, and then so all the things come up, that pleasure's indulgent, I feel guilty, I feel selfish, and all of these sort of things. So there's often a deconditioning of the thoughts and beliefs piece to really connect to why pleasure is good and important for you. And that's individual for everybody. But it's such a key stage of the exploration around our relationship with pleasure.
Right. And it's, I mean, even if you expanded the word pleasure to any, like just self care or, include self care under that umbrella is because, I mean, I called the podcast back to me and as trying to remind not, well, women especially, but not just women, because there are some men who do it, but you have to take care of yourself because if you don't put yourself first, and this is where women struggle a lot, if you don't put yourself first, no one else is going to. And then you are at that bottom of the list because you put everyone else first. And you can't bring the energy and you can't be the person that you want to be if you in like all aspects of your life if you're not taking care of all of
Yeah.
the things you need to take care of for yourself. And yeah, pleasure is a big one. If you're unhappy all the time and not feeling good, then how can you bring joy into other people's lives if
And
that's
I think,
important?
yeah, and what you said about those little changes for big changes is often women fear that if they put themselves first, that their family will fall apart or there'll be a riot on their hands or people won't want to be with them because often as women we get value from doing things for other people. So all of these patterns need unhooking, and that's why go gently.
Yeah.
And you know, going gently and experimenting with for a lot of women I work with, it's learning to say no, and no is not a word that's in their vocabulary. So how do I say no to this and it be okay, and deal with this discomfort at first, but exercise that no muscle so I build up more confidence in saying no, that's not for me, and then yes, that is for me. So it takes time. Go gently is my advice with it.
It's so true. Yeah, you can't do 100% because when you start saying no, people, I mean, they're used to you being a certain way.
Yeah.
Like there's that unwritten agreement that if I ask mom to do this, she will do it, even if she is stretched to her limits. I just know. And yeah, that's great. But at the same time, what if that's the breaking point, right? You can only stretch so far. So saying no, and I do talk about, no as a muscle. I think that's awesome that you said that because I'm like, you got to exercise it. And it does get stronger. And you do feel it gets so that you don't have to say it as often, I find as well, when you've got your boundaries decided and people know, you know, this is actually the time when mom or whoever or my spouse is doing this. This is the time when they said they needed this time, so I'm not going to go and interrupt that unless the house is on fire or something. But and and exercising your no muscle, you will get stronger. It will
Yeah.
feel better and it won't be so awful feeling
Yeah.
and it'll be normalized. And I find it is challenging that because who do you call when you're in trouble? You always call your mom, right? And because you know that she will do it. But it's like there. Do you see any shift away from that in the like latest generation or the latest way the world is? Is that shift starting where it's not always on the women to do everything, or do you still think those traditional roles are hanging around a lot?
I think the shift is starting, but I do feel those traditional roles are hanging around. Definitely. I mean, I'm working with a client, one of my clients in her 50s at the moment, because a lot of people come to me. Menopause is obviously a big transition of questioning life and what you're doing and all of these things. And I was working with a woman in her 50s, and how she was talking to me about how she's experienced sex. She said, "Gosh, I sound like a woman from the 1950s." And, and so these things are so deeply ingrained in our psyche, but also in our culture, because I think our modern culture of pressure to be productive, to be, people who feel that they have to be busy to be valuable in the workplace, and all of these messages as well feed into this. Is, I think there's more layers than just those traditional roles.
Oh,
But I
right.
work with so many women who are, modern women in successful careers, all sorts of things, running companies, who are still believing, or have learned to believe, that a man's pleasure is more important than theirs. And they've maybe not experienced it where there's been equality in the pleasure that they experience. And so it's very still, unfortunately, quite pervasive.
Right. Yeah. And I guess, I mean, all of the media that we are fed doesn't necessarily shift it all that well, shift the perception at all. And it's funny because I watch a lot of, I'm into cozy murder mysteries, which has nothing to do with intimacy necessarily, but they're often like taking place in the 20s and 30s and 40s, the older ones, or they're set in the past. And it is interesting to watch the roles back then, you know. Even I was watching Sherlock Holmes. It's the 1800s, and a man says to his wife, "You know, this is man's conversation. You should take yourself away." I'm like, "What?" So, and it is true. It's interesting. Remember the book Lean In?
No.
An American woman, whose name has escaped me. Somebody will tell me later. Wrote it, and it was about how to be successful in the corporate world as a woman. And you
Right.
had to, it was like you have to lean in and be like a man. And I was really offended by that book when it came out, because I was, my takeaway from it was, no, like, that's not how we should be. We're different. We operate differently. We operate in the world differently. Like, there's the yin yang, and it needs to be balanced. And it needs, if you operate like a man, then you are sacrificing the parts of yourself that I think are important. And
Mm.
this is kind of what I was taking from it. And so I feel like when we're telling women, you know, to value yourself, like, that might feel like we're asking them to lean in. I'm like, no, no, that's not what we're saying at all. You're still going to be you, but know who you are. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and that know who you are piece is so important, especially if you're a woman who's putting everyone first and all of these things, and it really takes time. And so really getting to know what brings you joy, what lights you up, your boundaries, as we've already talked about, getting to know your body and how your pleasure works. So many people are following a script when they have sex of how sex should look.
Right.
And it's that's so deep and ingrained in our psyches. So yeah, absolutely getting to know yourself, and which is as I'm in menopause now, it's a whole nother level of the journey that I'm getting to know myself with. So know myself through.
And yes, menopause, suddenly you have a whole new body. I find there's a bit of a frustration process. You're like, but I liked the one that I had. I kind of, maybe you did or didn't. I mean, I kind of liked the way things worked before. Now, what the hell with this thing? What's going on with this thing? And it is challenging to find someone who can explain it to you. I actually had a friend one day recommend a book to me. This was like 6 or 7 years ago, and I can't remember the name of the book now. But because I was having headaches, and she said, "Oh, you're having menopause." I'm like, nobody said there was headaches. So, and because often, like, the top level, all you know about menopause is hot flashes. That's all
Yeah.
people talk about. But there's so many other layers to it that you try to navigate. And your partner or spouse or whoever may not understand it. And I'm pretty convinced that a lot of people get divorced because of menopause, because the woman doesn't know what's going on and can't understand what's going on, and the husband can't figure out why his wife is different and
And
fights.
also, yeah, and also businesses. I cannot remember the statistic, but I was talking to a menopause coach in the UK, and she's been advising the government the number of women that either leave work or shut down their businesses at menopause because of the health problems and all sorts of stuff. It was something like a fifth, or it was a
Wow.
lot of women. And I was absolutely stunned. And I feel so blessed that I work for myself. So through my journey, I've been able to have flexibility to rest when I need and take a bit of time out and things like that. But for example, working in the corporate world or a business where you need to show up every day is a whole different thing.
And you need to show up in a certain way every day.
Absolutely.
And what if that's not on that day?
Yep.
I mean, someday, I mean, even if not in menopause, like there's days when
Yep.
I worked in corporate where I was just like, I am just shutting my door today. And I hope no one knocks because I'm just not in the mood today for this. And I think that, I mean, being an entrepreneur is awesome because you can say, right now it's time to take a nap, which I think is like take a nap. That's my pleasure. Nap is my self care. Yes, I'm tired. I'm going to lie down and have a nap and being okay with that. When I first started dating my current partner, I would not nap. I was still that corporate driven drive person. And he was the one who actually said to me one day I was really tired. He said, "Why don't you take a nap?" I'm like, "No, I can't take a nap." And he actually made me go and lay down, put the blanket on. He said, "Just lay there for 5 minutes." And of course, I fell asleep. And I got up 20 minutes later and I was just, oh my God, that was so good. He's like, "Yeah, I told you." So giving yourself, I think we don't give ourselves permission for that very often. Whatever you, and maybe if you don't know what pleasure is, you have to be curious and experiment.
100%. And that's the thing is like just to spend time reflecting on maybe what you've done in the past that you used to enjoy that you've maybe stopped doing. And that maybe you stopped doing for good reason, but there may be things that you've just not picked up since you've had kids or since you've had a career change or all sorts of different reasons. So, but then also get curious what you enjoy. It might be that you see somebody doing something, it might be running in the park or you see something on telly or read something and think, I'd like to try that. And then if you're not sure, experiment, you know, try these things out. Do I enjoy this? And I think it's really good to build up a sort of a bank of pleasures, if you like, that
Oh, yes.
work for you and sustain you that you can turn to. Because for me, pleasure is what feels good to you. And what feels good to you when you're in a good place versus what feels good to you when you're having a hard time might be different. So, for example, before Christmas, my partner was in hospital for a couple of weeks and he was seriously ill. He's all well now, thank goodness.
Thank
But it was
goodness.
a very stressful time. But I really noticed how I was able to self care because I know what brings me pleasure. And, if that would have been me 20 years ago, I'd have probably ate and drank my way through that situation. And now I'm able to go, right, I need to have a walk or I want to have a nap. I want to have a bath. I want to watch something or read a book or cook some good food. And just knowing the things that are nourishing and sustaining for you is just such a great resource to have. Because then in the more challenging times as well, you can care for yourself and look after yourself in a different way.
And not waiting for those times to try and figure it out.
Yes.
Right? Because you don't have the bandwidth then to say, does this give me pleasure? I don't know. I'm too stressed out to be able to tell. So it's like fill up your coffers early with
Yeah.
the things that will assist you. And then, I mean, it's interesting, like your partner was in the hospital and you did allow yourself that time to still take care of yourself because a lot of people wouldn't, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's huge.
And it's keeping it simple because there can be bigger pleasures like I want to play music, or I would love to be strong in my body, things that take time and practice. But there's just the more simple things like the having the coffee and looking out the window, taking the time to look at the sunset or listen to a bird sing rather than just rushing past, having a couple of extra minutes in the shower where you just have some time enjoying the smell of the shower gel and just really being present with your body and your skin. We work from home now so much more. And, for me, actually just not just slobbing around. Some days that's great, but, putting things on that I feel good in, washing my hair and just really enjoying these things. And so it's just, I think those simple things, have it, what's your favorite tea, and really allowing yourself permission to enjoy that. Self-touch is a wonderful one. I feel we can do so much self-soothing. That can be just squeezing our hands or stroking our own hair, playing with our hair, or massaging our feet or our bellies, and just all these little things that we can do. Having a stretch is one of my favorite ones as well. When I'm sat at the computer a lot, just stretching out the body and just feeling and enjoying the pleasure of the stretch and feeling my body feeling alive. And it's these little things, I think, that are so important as part of it as well. Or enjoying an embrace with your child or a lover, or just all these little moments.
And we do live in these bodies. So I wonder sometimes if we spend too we it's too much, you're too much in your head, and the body is this like, just be quiet, just be quiet. But it needs to be a partnership. The body is where you live, and it's built to feel and experience and have all of that. And that's what it's there for. So let it do those things that it's supposed to do and keep you healthy at the same time. Because
Mm.
there's a loop, right? It's like the body feels good, the brain feels good. The brain feels good, the body feels good. If one of them doesn't feel good, it's going to affect the other.
And we live in a culture which is so mentally dominated. And so many people I work with find they struggle to switch off their brains and their minds and their thoughts. And for me, one of the best routes into that is moving the body or paying attention to the body. And that might be dancing around the kitchen. Dancing is one of my favorite practices. Just shaking the stress out the body when you just stand up from the computer and just give your body a really, really good shake, and watch how the mind can quieten down after that. Self massage, as I mentioned, going for walks, whether it's yoga, Pilates, whatever it is, running, moving the body is one of the best things we can do for our health and vitality. And we sit down too much, all of these different things, and this is where we feel our pleasure. And so just developing and cultivating a relationship with our body and how our body feels, because I've worked with many women who they don't like their breasts or they don't like their bellies. And then when they actually start to do some self massage, they go, oh, but they actually feel quite nice. And then as they enjoy the feeling and sensation, how they look sometimes becomes more secondary. And so, often when we're in our heads judging our bodies, I don't feel much, I don't feel any desire, my body doesn't look good, all of these things. But if we can start to drop in and feel how things are in our body, and safety, of course, is a fundamental piece of that.
Right.
um, as we start to feel what's good in our body, we can access more pleasure for sure.
That's awesome. Yeah. I think about the connection a lot. I mean, I've been doing yoga, practicing yoga for 23 years. I've been teaching it for 19, and I notice that I I am so in tuned with my body, and oh, what's like, I'll go, what is that? What's that thing doing right there? That's different. So I have that mind body connection developed over the years, and I can see people where they're too, like I don't know how you could experience pleasure if you're always in your head, but trying to help them find that way back in whatever way it is. I mean, yoga, tai chi, however you
Yeah.
move, walks are amazing, breathing, all of that is so good. And I guess you work also with couples, you mentioned, so helping them find their way back. Do you find that different than working with just one-on-one with people, or
Yeah,
how does that
absolutely.
work?
Absolutely, because you've got two people and two sets of either desires or communication challenges. There's just two sets of people, and they often say you've got the two individuals, and then you've got the third, which is the relationship.
Right. I was going to say, is it more facilitation or?
Absolutely. So when I work with couples when they've got a good ground of wellness and love in their relationship. So my expertise is not working with couples who are, for example, at the brink of breakup, but helping couples who maybe the spark's gone. They're living more like friends than lovers. They've maybe, or one of them could be a woman that I would work with as well. So, for example, they're feeling a bit stuck because one of them's wanting sex more than the other one, or one of them's wanting sex and the other one doesn't feel like sex and they're not sure why. So, those are the sort of things that
Right.
I work with. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, that is probably for some people, it's they need you to help them have the conversation, because how do you have that conversation with someone you've been with for a long time and you've never brought it up, and suddenly it feels like it's the elephant in the room and you're just all ignoring it. It's like,
Or what happens is it sort of rears its head. There's a conversation, yeah, we'll get it sorted. And then another year goes by, New Year or something happens, it comes up again, or a couple months later, and this pattern happens.
right,
And so help to talk about it, but more to understand why it's like it is. Because
right,
often the couples feel that there must be something really wrong with them if they're struggling in this area. Or if, I often get people say, well, if it's just not natural for us, there must be something up with us. But,
right,
sex isn't just natural for people. We don't get taught this stuff. We need guidance. Just, we learn to eat, we learn to walk, we learn to drive a car, all of these things. And when it comes to sex, we just don't talk about it and expect it to get on with it. And so, debunking the myths that sex shouldn't just be natural. And actually, we can learn these skills. And also, a very common thing I see is couples think they can have great intimacy without ever talking about it. And so learning to talk about it, learning to give each other feedback and take feedback in a way that's not critical, but that is about, so for example, a common thing is I might not like my partner's touch, but I've maybe asked them to slow it down. They've taken it as a criticism, so I don't ask them again. And
right.
actually, that they feel it's about them, but it's not, and at all. So these little knots that couples get into, and they get more and more tangled over time. And then we just work together to tease out these sticky little points to free up the space for them to come back together and to enjoy sex and create some great sex and intimacy.
That's awesome. And you mentioned that you are on, are you on Instagram? Yes.
Yes.
The
Yep.
gram. The gram. I call it the gram. So I'm going to make sure that everyone can find their way to you. It'll be in the show notes, everyone. It'll be above, below, beside. I can't remember. It depends where you're consuming, but for sure you will be able to connect with Sarah Rose, because, come on, this is something that if you're having a challenge, then you definitely don't want to just ignore it. It doesn't go away. Doesn't
Absolutely.
doesn't magically resolve. Um, Thank you, Sarah Rose. But before, I always ask, the very last thing I always ask everyone is, do you have any final words of wisdom?
Mm. Yeah. I feel to say that, do reach out, whether it's me or somebody else. I have never, ever had anyone who's reached out regret it. And I sometimes think, for me, when I reached out for some support, my fear was that somebody would say, yeah, actually, there is something wrong with you. And, you know, and, 100% there is nothing wrong with you if you feel that. All the women I work with, the majority of them feel they're broken or there's something wrong with you. And I promise you there isn't. I see it as like a plant. We need the right conditions for that plant to flourish. And so when we're in that place, magic can happen, and I promise you it's not as scary as it is. And actually, one of my programs is called Pleasure Mastery, and a client said to me the other day, God, it's actually like life mastery, because
Oh,
it's
cool.
about enjoying life more and enjoying pleasure in our bodies and all the good stuff more. So it's never just about sex, and it's never just about intimacy. So whether you're stuck with sex, you're stuck with intimacy, really just reach out and get some support. There's some great people out there, and you'll not regret it.
That's awesome. And I'm definitely going to put the link to your course as well,
Thank you.
because we want people to be able to have their pleasure mastery, their life mastery, feel good, because when people are feeling better, it raises the vibration of everybody right around them and it ripples
Absolutely.
outwards. So we're doing this for the
100%.
planet, friends. You're doing it for the planet. Thank you so much. Thank you. Yes, listener friends, make sure you check out the links. And if you feel brave enough, you can share this with someone who you think might benefit from it. Take care, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Hi, my friend. Thanks so much for listening to this entire podcast. If you found it useful and you're like me and you like helping others, please feel free to share this. Just give it a like, give it a comment. If you found something useful in it, there's a chance that someone else will find something useful as well. Also, if you have any questions at all, I can absolutely help, and I would love to help. You can email me at heather@prosperityflowcoaching.com. If you want more of this awesome content, you can follow me on Instagram, Heather Stewart Coaching. You can follow me on Facebook, Prosperity Flow Coaching. And I have a personal request. I want to help as many people as I can with these podcasts. And if you could give me a review, hopefully a good one, if you could share, if you could send this out into the world, I would truly appreciate it. I hope you have an amazing day, and I hope that you find your way to wellness by getting back to me. Take care, my friend.